How's it going, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Patriot Podcast. We are sitting here with guest number 5, and we are sitting in his building here in Chesapeake, Virginia. Our guest today is very special, has helped grow the Patriot Hard Seltzer brand to new heights. He served in the Navy and is now a motivational speaker, a New York Times bestselling author, and we're proud to call him a friend of ours. So, Jason Redman, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you, happy to be here in this beautiful building of yours. Let's dive into your story and see. I kind of want to hear more about. We know surface level information about you and your story and the conversations we've had reading your book. But I want to kind of dive into early life, what brought you into the military, why you pursued that career path, and kind of go from there. So, growing up, were you always wanting to be in the military? Was that a career path that you envisioned for yourself, or was that something you kind of stumbled your way into?
No, I mean, from a very young age, I always wanted to be in the military. I grew up in a family where both grandparents served. My dad served. My dad's dad was a very decorated B-24 pilot in World War II. Flew all his missions in the European theater, which was not a lot of pilots made it through 25 missions. Flying over the flak-filled skies of Germany and the European theater, and he managed to fly all of them. They were actually shot down over Yugoslavia, and he crash-landed the plane, and they survived and evaded their way back. I have a newspaper, well, it's at my dad's house, but this newspaper article about my grandfather, and he got the Distinguished Flying Cross for that mission, 7 air medals. My mom's father fought with the French in World War II. And then my great uncle, on my dad's side, so my paternal grandfather flew B-24s, and my great uncle, he flew some type of fighter in the Pacific and was shot down and killed in the war. So long history of military service. My dad was a airborne rigger, the guys that packed the parachutes, and an airborne instructor in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So yeah, from a young age, that's all I ever wanted to do. When I was, probably 11, the original Top Gun came out. And I wanted to be a pilot like Maverick. I was like, man, this would be cool.
Nice.
I'll fly jets in the Navy. This would be the coolest thing. But as I got a little older, I was learning more about special operations. My dad jumped out of planes. I was like, man, that's cool. Maybe that's what I want to do. And I was probably 14 when my dad said, hey, you should check out, there's a group of guys in the Navy, special operations guys. They're called Navy SEALs. And SEALs, up until pretty much 2001, went through Army Airborne School. That's how we did our jump qualifications back in the day, including me. I would end up later go through Army Jump School. But my dad at that time had, served with some SEALs and jump school, and said, hey, you should check these guys out. Very secretive, considered by many to be the hardest training in the entire U.S. military. And I don't know what it was. There was something about that I was like, that's what I want to do. I wasn't a big athlete or anything like that at that time. I didn't even work out at all. We grew up kind of on a old tobacco farm in North Carolina at that time. And I just said, okay, if I'm going to go become a Navy SEAL, I guess I need to get tough. So I went out for the football team, and
just because you wanted to go into the military.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, I was like, okay, I need to go do hard things. I need to work out. So I'm going to go, went out for the football team, and I was a little tiny runt and, second string at best. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot about taking a hit, getting knocked down, being a supporting part of a team, about working out. I started wrestling after that, and I learned a lot about grit and once again, working out. Wrestling is a very interesting sport because it's you against another opponent, and oftentimes it's a very mental game that's part of it. There's also a very physical game where you're working out, you're trying to cut weight and be ready for matches. For me, it was kind of funny when I came on the team. I wrestled at the 112, 119 weight class, and our state champion was our 119-pound wrestler, a guy by the name of Vincent Crump. And Vince just used to whoop my ass on a regular basis, man. But it taught, once again, you learn a lot getting beat and coming back and showing up every day. There are a lot of people who get their ass kicked and they just can't handle that. They
give up.
They leave. And I don't know, man, it just made me more resolute. I never beat Vince. I never even come close to beating Vince. But I always went after it with everything I had. And those things, I think, kind of shaped me into, getting ready to join the Navy. When I was 16, I went to the recruiting office and told them, hey, I want to be a Navy SEAL. The recruiters laughed me out of the office. Here I was, like this 5'0" nothing, 120-pound guy, and there was a real crusty old boatswain's mate there who was like, you're not a SEAL, you don't look like a SEAL, you'll never be a SEAL, you don't have what it takes. And so I decided, okay, well, screw those guys. I'll go join the Army. I'll become a Ranger and a Green Beret, and started down that path. And I actually got all the way to, at 17, I went to MEPS, which is the Military Enlistment Processing Facility, to start the whole process. And I failed the airborne physical. When they looked at my ear, I ruptured my eardrum when I was a kid, and they said, hey, you can't equalize. So you're not going to be able to go to jump school. You're not going to be able to go airborne. And I was like, well, if I can't go airborne, I can't become an airborne ranger. And they were like, oh no, that's okay. We'll find you something else to do in the Army. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
So special forces or nothing.
Yeah, that was it. That was my mindset. And thankfully, my parents knew that I had, I had dove and I'd done other things. So they said, well, let's find a doctor, an ENT, who can look at you. And he evaluated me and said, hey, you can equalize. That's not a problem. I got a letter. And by the time all this occurred, I mean, fate works in interesting ways. The crusty old boatswain's mate recruiter at the Navy office had left, and there was a new recruiter. And he said, hey, I heard you were the kid that wanted to become a SEAL, but you went over to the Army. You still want to be a SEAL? He's like, I'll help you. Great guy by the name of Henry Horn. And I said, yeah, man, that's what I want to do. And got that letter. He helped walk me through the process, helped me a lot. And I joined the Navy on September 11, 1992 in my senior year of high school. They called it the delayed entry program back then. So completed high school and left in 1990, the summer of 1993 for boot camp.
Any plans to go to college at that point, or is that not on your radar?
I wasn't a good student. I didn't like school. I did okay in school. I was a B and C student usually. And I had no desire. It was my plan to go in the military. I'd never once considered college. It wasn't my path, and that's not what I wanted to do.
Interesting. So once you get into the Navy, what are the next steps after that? What do you go straight to qualifying for Navy SEALs, or is there other steps before that?
Sort of. So the process to become a SEAL today is much different than it was. Today, SEAL teams are in the spotlight a lot. Everybody knows about the SEAL teams, so they actually have it's kind of interesting. They have almost like a draft to get into the SEAL teams today. Young men come along and they say, hey, I want to be a SEAL. And there are minimum requirements they have to meet. They have to meet, the academic requirements with the ASVAB. There's psychological screening. And then there's obviously the PT test that they take once they qualify for the minimum requirements. Then they get rack and stacked into this draft, and leadership in the SEAL teams evaluates them and says, hey, we think these are our top candidates, and they're the ones who get a slot, but they're slotted to go straight to BUD/S. So they haven't even joined the Navy yet, and they get that slot to go to BUD/S. BUD/S stands for Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. It's the school that every SEAL goes through in order to become a SEAL. when I went through, they didn't have anything like that. You had to apply for a job in the Navy that were they had a bucket of about 30 jobs that were regular Navy jobs, but they called them SEAL ratings. And, I looked down the list and I was like, I don't know what I want to do. And, naively, they're like, intelligence specialist. I'm like, intelligence? Like, that's cool. Is that like James Bond? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, I'll be James Bond. This is cool. So I sign up to become an intelligence specialist and go to boot camp and go to a school right here in Virginia Beach where that school is. And, Intel, obviously, there are aspects of it that, maybe a microcosm or like the James Bond human intelligence side of the house. The majority of it is a lot of analysis. And I remember I graduated a school and they sent me, I was waiting to go to SEAL training at that time, and I'm jumping ahead, but just kind of a funny story. They signed me to the SEAL team and they're like, oh, you're an intel specialist. Good. We have this entire library of classified information. You're going to go in there and you're going to inventory everything. And I was like, James Bond, my ass. So, but anyways, going back to the process, that pipeline, it was basically, hey, you have to have a SEAL rating. You have to have a minimum score on the ASVAB, no different than today. But there wasn't a direct pipeline. Basically, it was, hey, go to boot camp. And some point in boot camp, there'll be a SEAL who's going to come up to the class and he's going to ask if there are any volunteers who want to become a SEAL. So I banked my entire career on this little bit of advice, like, okay, hey, this sounds great. Like, I go to boot camp and at some point somebody's just going to show up and be like, do you want to be a SEAL? So funny, so much margin for error there. But like they said, we were at the pool one day and this guy comes in front of the class and says, who wants to volunteer for SEAL training? I was like, let's go. So you take the screening test and boot camp. Still pretty similar today as what it was back then. 500-yard swim, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and then a timed 1.5-mile run. And there was probably, 10 or 12 of us that tried out for it, and I think only 3 of us qualified.
Did you do anything like to prepare for all of that, or were you sort of
I
banking?
was training all the time.
Okay.
So my senior year of high school, all I did was just trained. I worked out and I went to school. Interesting. I got myself kicked out of the house when I was 17. I was butting heads with my stepmom and dad. Got kicked out. So I was living on my own with my sister in North Carolina and working 2 jobs. I'd already, or maybe it was about that time that I enlisted. But thankfully, that kept me out of trouble because I knew that if I got arrested or if I did anything stupid, it would cost me my career because SEALs have to have a clearance. So I knew you can't have anything major, drugs or anything like that on your record. So that, for the most part, kept me out of trouble. Although I still was partying and enjoying myself probably too much, and so much so that my sister kicked me out. Probably around December time frame, which I ended up moving back to Florida with my mom. So thankfully it was probably a gift in disguise because the requirements to graduate from Florida were different from North Carolina. So I was behind the power curve. So all I did was studied and worked out for, probably those 6-7 months before I went to boot camp, which was great because it got me ready. And I was in great shape when I went to boot camp. I actually won the push-up contest that we had in boot camp. I did like 420 some push-ups or something.
Not
so.
I'm assuming you have some micro breaks in there, but that's like
you were not
nonstop.
allowed to. Your knees couldn't touch the ground, and you couldn't you couldn't get up. So
you're literally just like
in the push-up position. So, I mean, I would stretch and stick my butt up in the air, but you were not allowed to, you weren't allowed to get up, and your knees could not touch the ground.
That is a lot of push-ups.
Yeah.
That's probably why you beat us
Crushed it.
every time we do the 4-fers.
Yeah, I can still do a few push-ups, all old and broken. But Yeah. So when I took the test, no, I didn't have any issues. It is interesting, the test now. Um, I feel like I sound like an old guy. It was so much harder when I did it. But it is true. You did the test in Navy dungarees. So the old Navy uniform was these denim tops and these denim bell-bottom jeans, and you wore these boondocker boots. They were steel-toed shoes. They were like a work boot, and that's what you had to run the 1.5 miles.
Oh my gosh.
When you did the run. So yeah, it's just kind of funny. Today, these kids, they run it in tennis shoes and shorts.
Yeah. Nice running shoes.
Yeah. So, but anyways, it's, I didn't have any issues. I was a great runner. I was a pretty fast runner back then. So, swimming, I was very comfortable in the water, but I wasn't like a super fast swimmer, which would end up being a little bit of a challenge to me when I got to SEAL training. I would come to learn.
That was going to be my question, is when you got to actual buds, what was the hardest part of the whole thing? Was it like the swimming portion? Because I've just seen other videos and other SEALs say like that's the most shocking part, is when they do like the drown proofing, and you guys are.
For me, no, that I was very comfortable in the water. So none of the drown proofing is where you're swimming with your hands and feet tied. That didn't bother me, not tying, all that stuff. Some guys struggle with the 50-meter underwater swim. I was okay with that. I did, Hell Week was very difficult. I had Thursday night of Hell Week. I kind of hit a point where I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And, maybe for a minute thought about quitting, and then kind of realized like, hey, if you quit, that's it, man. Your dream's over. Like you don't get to keep going. So thankfully kind of got past that and finished Hell Week. Pool competency is probably the second biggest thing that takes guys out of training. And it's, after you finish the first phase of SEAL training is really designed to weed people out. It's gruelingly physically hard. You're constantly doing physical activity. You're either running around the compound with a boat on top of your head. You're paddling that boat out past the surf zone, doing surf passage. You're doing log PT. You're working out. You're constantly wet and sandy. And then obviously during Hell Week, you do that the entire week, including not sleeping. So made it through all that. Second phase gets into dive training. So the first part of it is scuba training. You're learning scuba, but it's also, they're teaching you like advanced scuba, and they're also teaching you how to be very comfortable under the water if things go wrong. All of that culminates. So emergency procedures and all these different things, along with dive physics. So you have to learn dive physics, dive medicine. And actually, a lot of people don't realize that weeds out quite a few guys, the academic side, because there's a minimum requirement you have to pass. So that weeds some guys out. I was okay on that. But pool comp is the second biggest thing after Hell Week that takes guys out. And it's the final event that occurs before you start learning actual combat swimming, which is what we call diving, to take underwater, taking down targets and reconnaissance and things like that. You're diving a bubbleless rig. Pool comp is this evolution where you go down in your scuba gear and two instructors come down and basically they're kicking your ass under the water. They're bouncing you off the bottom and they're ripping off your gear and kind of slamming you against the bottom as much as they can, and trying to disorient you. They flip you around and slam you, flip. And in the process, they're ripping all your gear off and tie knots in your hoses or turn off your air or whatever it is. And you've got to settle yourself, and then there is a sequence you have to go through to fix your gear. Obviously, number one, you've got to get your air going again. If you mess up but there's a very methodical sequence, like step one, I have to do this. Step two, I do this. Step three, I do this. If you mess up the sequence, you fail. If you go to the surface, you fail.
How deep are you for this?
15 feet.
And it's regular pool water, so
It's
you
in a
can
pool.
see.
Oh yeah, you can
Okay.
see. Yep, you can see. But you have to fix yourself, get everything back on in the right sequence. So frequently, you're all disoriented. You just got your ass kicked. Guys, a lot of guys fail that. You have 4 chances. Me and my swim buddy, we failed the first 3. So we had all weekend to basically wait to retest on Monday. And we just sat around the room and did breath holding drills to try and expand our breath holding capacity to feel more comfortable as you're down there navigating these problems. So thankfully I passed it on Monday, but that's a pretty tough evolution. I remember him and I sitting there in our room, holding our breath till we almost passed out. Like, man, I hope we make this.
Did they let you just like practice with the gear on in the pool, or?
Nope.
Wow.
Nope.
So they probably just show you once or twice, and like you have to figure it out.
You wore it all week, so it is the culmination of everything for the week. I mean, it's not like they just throw it at you all week long. You're doing different evolutions that are basically a subset of what leads to pool comp. And the last part of pool comp. So if you go through that sequence and you can't fix everything, the last part of pool comp is you acknowledge that, hey, I can't fix my air. I've got to do what's called a free swimmer ascent. So this is where you swim to the surface, but you're having to exhale all your air because, when you're breathing compressed air at depth, the pressure compresses the air in your lungs. As you go up, the pressure expands, and the greatest expansion is occurring in the last 10 feet of water, really in the last, 3 to 5 feet. So if you don't, really expand yourself and exhale all the bubbles as you go up, all the air, that you had, you'll get what's called an air gas embolism. The air will expand too big in your lungs and it'll pass through, your lung tissue into your bloodstream, and that's what kills people. So it's a serious evolution. I mean, the instructors are watching you, but it's funny because you've been holding your breath for like 3 or 4 minutes, and now suddenly you have to exhale whatever you have left in your lungs as you go to the surface. So it's an interesting evolution, but.
So how much, like, you're holding your breath for 3 or 4 minutes, how much can the average person change how long they can hold their breath? I'm sure they teach you guys a lot of techniques in SEAL training, but I've always wondered, like, I can hold my breath for like a minute and a half or so without trying too hard, and without proper training either. So like, how much can the average person increase their breath holding?
I think I was holding my breath for maybe 2.5 minutes before pool comp. And when my buddy and somebody introduced us to this breath holding ladder. And it was a sequence of, you exhale and hold your breath for like 30 seconds. And then you inhale and then hold your breath for like 30 seconds. And you would just increase like 5 seconds, on each side until you got to, but we increased, I want to say we were at like 3.5 to 4 minutes by Monday, all weekend long. That's all we did.
Crazy.
We sound around, and I think lung capacity there was a guy in our class who could hold his breath for 7 minutes. I was reading Kate Winslet in Avatar 2. That chick got up to like 15 minutes, like insane, or maybe 12 minutes, but it was crazy the amount of time she was there. So some of that has to do with lung capacity. Some of it has to do with physiology.
And training, I'm sure too.
Yeah, and some of it's mental. Well, it is mental, but at some point you'll pass out. Yeah. I mean, that's the reality. At some point, unfortunately, you have to have oxygen. So really, it's how well does your body work? How big is your lung capacity?
Yeah, interesting. So, how early did you say Hell Week was in SEAL training?
So when I went through, it was the 6th week of training. Today, I think it's 3rd or 4th week, but
So very early.
yeah. Oh yeah. It's the culmination. It's designed to weed out, Hell Week is the ultimate crucible. We will break you mentally in Hell Week, and everyone, I don't care who you are. And you reach that point where you're like, okay, it doesn't matter. There's nothing you can do to me. I'll die before I quit. And literally people, decide I can't do this anymore and they quit, or you pass through that, that everybody has to pass through that barrier at some point during Hell Week.
When did most people drop? Was it like
in the beginning?
Okay.
Within the first 48 hours, you'll see the quitters. As a matter of fact, it's very rare in Hell Week to see quitters by Thursday. It's very rare. By that time, almost everybody has passed through. Like, there's almost nothing they can do to you at that point.
Is it like, do you see most people drop when they're doing the drills on the beach with like the boats, or is there any specific part of the week that you see most people just saying, I'm done?
In our class, we lost the most. I mean, it was a pretty insidious evolution called Steel Piers. It was on Tuesday night, so, Hell Week starts on Sunday. So we've been awake for 48 hours now, grueling physical activity. So, imagine, you go one night without sleep and all of us feel a little punch drunk. So imagine 2 nights and you've been in the most grueling physical training you've ever been in. In SEAL training, you're constantly freezing, so you just shake all the time. You're partially hypothermic, and I'm sure many times you're getting hypothermic. So you're just always shaking. So I don't know how, definitely by Wednesday, like your muscles start to spasm from always shaking. Tuesday night at Steel Piers, the nighttime is always the worst because at least during the day you've got some sun to try and warm you up. But at night, and they always had the worst instructors at night. As a matter of fact, shout out to you wherever you are out there, Mike Mayer. But we had an instructor whose name was Mike Mayer, and he was the leader of the midnight shift, Chief Mayer, and we called him Chief Nightmare. And he was brutal. And when he showed up at midnight, it was like the demon from hell showed up, man. And he ate that up, bro. Like he would, any of you want to quit, now's the time to do it because I'm going to break you tonight. It will start. And he would just every night it was like that.
Yeah. Did they all have that mentality?
Their goal is don't get me wrong. Some instructors were much harder. Some instructors were your friend, and they were encouraging you, and some instructors were not. Yeah. And you did not like them. Yeah. Chief Nightmare was not your friend.
I'm curious because I know David Goggins in his book, he mentioned how he kind of like found strength in trying to prove the instructors wrong.
Yeah.
And I was curious, like, are they all like coming at you or some of them, like, because I feel like Hell Week in itself, even without the instructors bearing down on
No, don't get me wrong. There are definitely, I had an instance of this. I'm a little runt. I was probably the smallest guy in the class. I was 5'7" and 135 pounds when I went through. And but I also, I got a lot of spunk and swagger. And I just made up for it probably by, I would try and do whatever I could to be first or whatever. And, I didn't always accomplish that. But I remember one day we were at the pool and obviously some of the instructors noticed me and felt like, hey man, this guy's got a real spark. We're impressed by him. And how do I know that? Because it was a miserable day. I started SEAL training in January. Well, out in California, it's beautiful year round, except, at night, it still gets down into the 50s at times, even 40s. During Hell Week, it got into the 40s. That's cold. And it was a miserable day. It was pouring rain all day. And we were at the pool and they had us land on the deck. It was the very beginning of training. We were only a couple weeks in. And we were just frozen, man. And they took a break and they allowed us to use the restroom. So we're all in line to use the restroom. And all the instructors are standing as we go by the restroom. The showers are off to the left. And all the instructors are standing under the hot water, to try and warm up. Because, it was frigid. And I'm walking through and one of the chiefs like, Redman, get your ass, drop down and get your ass over here. And I bear crawl over and he's like, get under this cold water, you piece of shit. And he turned on the shower and I'm like, oh my God. And I get in there and it's warm water. And he's screaming at me the whole time, like, you piece of shit, you're the worst loser. And I'm in this hot water. Like, he totally hooked me up. Yeah, totally hooked me up. So he kind of let me know, hey, keep doing what you're doing. So little things like that.
Yeah. Cool. So, clearly you made it through SEAL training. You moved on to have a very successful career. I want to hear about like your very first deployment. Where was that to? What were you feeling? What were you thinking? What did that look like?
So my very first deployment was 97 to South America. So pre 9/11, the SEAL teams were area of the world focused. So I was at SEAL Team 4, which was focused on Central and South America. So we were the jungle warfare experts. So I'd been through a lot of jungle warfare training and things like that. And when we deployed, we would forward deploy to Panama because the U.S. had multiple bases there, and there was a SEAL unit there in Panama, and we basically, a platoon would be trained up to go to war, or trained up to do contingency operations, whatever it was, and then you'd be assigned to this unit. And from the unit, then you would be on standby in Panama, but forward deployed to different places in Central and South America based on what was happening. So went down there, and that's what happened. We got assigned to do different trips. So sometimes we went to El Salvador, or I went to Ecuador, and we did different exercises with host nations. Also, the drug war in the 90s was still pretty heavy, so we were augmenting. I spent a lot of time in trips to Colombia and Peru doing counter-drug stuff. So that was and Colombia was really kind of the first time that I was exposed, I guess, to the dangers of the job. Not that training's dangerous and things like that, but when you're young, it's just fun. I get to jump out of planes. I get to blow things up. I get to, you give me a weapon and I get to go do cool things. In Colombia, I went down to a location in Colombia called San Jose del Guaviare, and it was southern Colombia, not too far from down on the border, and pretty heavy jungle area, very heavily controlled by the guerrilla force and also cartel controlled. And there was a small special forces camp in this area, and we were down there augmenting them and training them and working with them while they went out and conducted counter-drug missions. And it was there for the first time, probably more than any in my life, where I got to see poverty at the highest level. Because, this is third world country, rural, no money. I remember at one point, word spreads that Americans are in certain places, and especially special force teams, part of our job is building relationships with the locals. So frequently what would happen is we would have locals who they'd come to the special forces base for like med call and sick call. So it was one of the things like our medics would be trained to do. And I remember one day they brought this little girl that was totally burned, and they wanted us to fix her. And she was severely burned, like in danger of dying. And we wrapped her up, and we were on the river and decided, we asked the Colombians, hey, where's the closest medical place? Like, we can't help this girl. Like, she needs like urgent care, surgical. And this little girl was young, like 3 maybe. And so we put her in the boat and we went down the river. And I remember they were like, yeah, this is the medical facility. And we took her in, and it reminded me something out of like a horror movie. Bad lighting, flickering, like everything was old. Like the medical tools were old and rusted. And I remember turning this little girl over and just like, oh my God, like I don't know if she survived or not. We went back, maybe a week later to check on her, and like her dressings were soiled, and, that was third world healthcare. So I don't know if that girl survived or not, but it was kind of a first eye opener to me. Like, man, this is poverty. Like when you can't even get medical care because they don't have the money or the equipment. On that same trip, I saw my first person killed We had the Colombians came up to us and was like, "Hey, we have a guy that was shot. Someone shot into the camp," which happens sometimes. But this guy had been shot in the head, and they were like, "Hey, fix him."
So just walking through your camp, you could just get shot.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It was a weird situation. We question if maybe the Colombian officer shot him because it didn't look like a rifle wound. It looked like a pistol wound. There was no exit wound. But needless to say, the guy was brain dead. So our medic and our senior chief were like, "Hey, let's work on this guy," and because he was like, "We're not going to fix him. I mean, this guy's dead." But we did medical training on him. We tried to fix him. We ended up criking him, which that was kind of neat, and that was the first time I had ever A, medically worked on a human, and B, saw someone who was dead. That same trip, we were placing sensors along the river to track boat movement at night. And I remember we went and placed those sensors, and then a couple weeks later, we went back to collect them, maybe a week later. And we went up to the bank, and I was a new guy, I was a newer guy in the platoon, and my senior chief's like, "Hey, all right, go in there and recover that sensor." And the Colombians are like, "Yeah, if the FARC was the name of the military unit, the military guerrilla force that worked with the cartels at times, they were like, hey, if the FARC finds anything, they booby trap it." So they're like, boom. So yeah, I'm going in to find this sensor that we emplaced on the bottom of the tree, and in my mind, all I'm thinking about is every step I take, I'm going to blow up. And thankfully, nothing happened. But it's just kind of interesting. It was my first introduction to war and violence. That same trip, one night, we started getting intel that there was a very large guerrilla force moving towards our camp, 400-man force, huge, far bigger than either the special force, the Colombian special force team, or us. We probably totaled 30 people in that camp, maybe. And so Special Operations Command was monitoring this, and we were told, "Hey, be ready to leave at a moment's notice. We may have to figure out how to get you guys out of there if the FARC decide to attack this camp." So every night we were sleeping in our gear with our weapons ready to go. We were reviewing our we call it an evasion plan. So what's our emergency plan if we were to be overrun? And I remember one night we're I'm asleep, and all of a sudden in the middle of the night, just the world explodes, gunfire all around the camp, explosions around the camp. I drop out of my bed and grab my gun, and I I run outside, and we had these bunker things next to they were these old metal huts that we were sleeping in. I run outside, and our senior chief and some of our guys are kind of watching behind this bunker wall. And I'm like, "What's going on?" And he said, "I don't know. The Colombians are shooting in all directions." He's like, "I'm going to go find out." He said, "Prep the radios for evasion," meaning get ready. He was like, "Go prep 2 thermite grenades, which are incendiary grenades that'll melt steel." And we had these communication towers in our hut that had all our encrypted communications for us to communicate back to the U.S. And basically he was saying, "Hey, get 2 thermite grenades ready because we're going to melt all our radios so that we can go on evasion." And I was like, seriously? like the reality of the situation, it wasn't enough that there's all this gunfire out there, but I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like this is real? What? Yeah. And he's like, "Yeah, go do it, Nug." So, grab the thermite grenades and set them, and I'm just kind of ready, waiting. He comes back a few minutes later, and he's like, "We'll see what happens." He said, "I think it's just chaos." And that's what it was. It turned out that somebody had fired into the camp. We sometimes call it recon by fire. An enemy force will test the security on a camp to see what happens.
Sounds like they saw your full force.
Oh yeah, they definitely
Saw it
saw the
all.
response. So the FARC element they watched on imagery, they decided to go the other way, which was good for us.
How big was this camp? Like when you say camp, is it like a fully fortified sort of base, or was it like kind of small? You said there wasn't that many people
small?
there. 30
Yeah,
people
it was
at
small.
max.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know, 500 by 500 yards maybe.
What's at the perimeter? What type of security?
They had towers with obviously machine guns and, the Colombians didn't have 40 millimeter, but they had some sort of grenade launcher that they were firing out into the woods, so that was exciting. So yeah, that was my first introduction to, I don't want to say combat because we weren't necessarily fighting directly against another individual, but, first time I was shot at and first time, like, oh, hey, this is for real, Wait, you want me to melt the radios? And
It's getting real.
yeah.
I remember in your book you were talking about how you guys had with the combat versus not combat, like there was confusion there as to whether like you should or could claim you saw combat.
Yeah, so in the Army, they have the combat infantryman's badge. In the Navy, we have the combat action ribbon. And after all that happened, that became a discussion amongst us. Like, hey, do we put in for a combat action ribbon? Like, one of our officers brought it up. And we were all like, no. Like, why would we do that? We weren't in combat. Like, in our mind, it was like, direct engagement. You're shooting at another person. But it's just kind of funny. Because when I look back on that and you look at the war later, combat was defined as high level of exposure to the enemy. So you didn't necessarily need to be in a gunfight, but if you were deep behind enemy lines and there was a high propensity for danger, meaning you were operating in an area where you could get ambushed, you could step on an IED, any of those things, that was considered combat, and that earns you a combat action ribbon. So technically, I guess I could go back and try and file and,
Would that have changed your career at all?
no, wouldn't have done anything. Just would have been an additional ribbon. That's all.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
So that you deployed there in '97.
Yeah.
Were you there when 9/11 happened?
No. So I did multiple more deployments. I did another deployment to Panama and then once again to Colombia and Peru and some other places. Came back and immediately deployed again because there was a counter drug school happening in Peru, and a joint school that was training the Peruvian Special Forces and Peruvian National Police. And it was being run by an Army Special Forces team, but they also had Coast Guard, and they were looking for a couple of SEALs to come down and augment and provide support. And my Spanish had gotten really good. I was a primary instructor at that point. So they were looking for those several things. I had all the quals they were looking for this deployment. So I was like, hey, I'll go. I was single then. And I deployed to a place called Iquitos, Peru, which is on the eastern side of Peru, right at the right where Brazil and the Amazon basin feeds into, the Amazon flows through Peru and into Brazil, which was really cool. It was deep jungle and just, everywhere you went, things could kill you. But Iquitos also is, it's a tourist spot, which a lot of people come down there to see the Amazon and the jungle. So it was kind of this weird mix where we were there doing counter drug training, but at night I would be able to go into town, and I was like dating this Peruvian girl and, practicing my Spanish, and she ended up having friends from Spain, and I would hang out with them and
Embedding yourself in the culture.
Yeah, it was a fun trip. I enjoyed it. So so 3.5 months down there for that deployment before I came home and became a training instructor, teaching marksmanship, reconnaissance, communications and evasion and recovery. And it was about that time that I got selected for a commissioning program. So wrapped up my time in training, and met Erica during that time, and left SEAL Team 4 early summer of 2001. And Eric and I got married, and then I started school at Old Dominion University as part of the commissioning program. So the commissioning program, called the Seaman Admiral program, at that time they selected 50 of the top enlisted members. Myself and a buddy of mine, Bobby Ramirez, both got picked up for that commissioning program and went to ODU together. So it was kind of cool. I had a good friend as we went through school, and that was your job. You were still active duty, but you were assigned to the ROTC unit, so you had to do all the leadership stuff with the ROTC, but you went to school and you got your degree. So I was at school, and I remember when September 11th happened, I had my first class of the day at 8 a.m., and I had gone over to the Student Center to meet Bobby, and I'll never forget, man. I'm getting a Starbucks from the little barista, and the dude's like all nervous as he's handing me his coffee. And I'm like, and he was muttering about something. And I was like, what are you saying? And he was like, the world's coming to an end, man. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, a plane crashed into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon's on fire. And I was like, all right, that's weird. So I walked over to where I was meeting Bobby in one of the Student Center areas, and the TV was on, and that's when we found out what happened. And he and I watched, obviously the first tower had already been hit and the Pentagon had been hit. And then we were watching live when the second plane hit, and I remember looking at him in that moment going, we're going to war, bro. So a couple days later, I went back to my old SEAL team and tried to get out of the commissioning program, because I knew we were going to deploy. Already everybody was being spun up. And my boss at that time, probably one of the most legendary leaders, the commanding officer at the SEAL team where I was assigned, prophetically was like, Red, this war will go on for decades. He said, go finish school. You'll get your chance.
How would he have known that?
Because he was a very astute individual who had been immersed in counterterrorism operations for years. He understood the battlefield. He understood the enemy. So I don't think he knew it per se, but he was he's one of the best SEAL leaders. Everyone would agree. I mean, and that's just a further testament to who he was when he made that statement, because we didn't get out of that war for 20 years.
Yeah. So you had to finish your time at ODU. How much longer did you were the first year?
It was right at the very beginning.
So 3 more years.
Yeah, which was tough. I mean, friends of mine were heading to war. We started, first casualties occurred in 2002. I didn't know either of those guys. I actually didn't know anybody that was killed initially. So, and our casualties really, so we lost a couple of guys in 2002, a couple of guys in 2003, and then maybe we had lost 1 or 2 guys in 2004, if I remember. But once again, there were some guys that most of them I did not know very well. I remember the last part of my senior year, I was the battalion commanding officer for the ROTC, and we decided to do this big event to honor the war. And down at ODU, we ran an American flag 1 mile for every service member that had been killed. And I don't remember the exact number, but it was roughly about 750 people in the entire war at this point, 3 years into the war. Yeah, 24 hours a day. We set up this tent and we got sponsors, and the goal was to raise money that we were going to provide to different nonprofits that supported veterans. And several of the SEALs that we lost, I invited them out, their families out, and we ran the flag in their honor. So I don't know, the reality, like, hey, and both Eric and I realized, like, here shortly I'm going to commission. That was probably March or April of '04, and I graduated May of '04 and commissioned back as an officer it would be May 12th. So yeah, as soon as before I commissioned, I had a friend of mine, Lieutenant Mike McGreevy, who I had known at SEAL Team 4, came to my house and said, "Hey man, I want you to be my assistant officer in charge for my platoon. I'm at SEAL Team 10. So I got orders to SEAL Team 10, and I was going to I joined Mike's platoon as the second officer in charge. And we, it was right into it. I mean, we started training up and getting ready. I was in Mike's platoon for about 3 or 4 months when they moved me into our sister platoon. I was in Echo platoon. They moved me into Foxtrot platoon. The reason they moved me in there is, I was a prior enlisted guy, and we had a pretty a good chief, but he also was a very opinionated chief, kind of a my way is the highway type guy. And they had a very senior, the officer in charge of the platoon. So they thought that, hey, let's move Red. He'd be a better balance between these two guys. But it didn't really work that way. Me and the chief really butted heads hard. I think he was looking for typically the way the military and definitely in the SEAL teams works, the chief takes the junior officer under his wing and grooms them to be a leader. And it's very much hey, the chief's making the call, and young ensign, it's your job to keep your mouth shut and do as I say. And that was not me. Being a prior enlisted guy, he and I butted heads really hard. And unfortunately, this is probably where I started to make some bad decisions as a young leader. Both frustration and kind of this perfect storm happened. I was a pre 9/11 SEAL, which was not war. And when I was at school, the entire SEAL teams went to war. Most of the guys in my new platoon had combat experience. It also was probably the biggest rewrite of tactics that we had seen since Vietnam. Oftentimes the way militaries work is the last period of sustained combat is what you base your tactics and your training off of. For us, that was Vietnam. That was the last time the SEALs had seen, day in, day out sustained combat. So by the time we got to Iraq and Afghanistan, we figured out, like, holy smokes, a lot of the things we're doing and we've trained for don't work. Like, we need to do a total rewrite. Urban operations, close quarters combat, mobility operations, mountain warfare, all these different things got totally rewritten. So when I came back, here I am, I'm this ex-enlisted guy, and I'd done really well. And suddenly I come back and I'm a brand new officer and I'm expected to know all these things. And I didn't. And instead of humbling myself and being like, hey man, hey, even though technically I outrank you, you know a lot more than me. Can you show me how to do this? My pride would not let me do that. So I kind of started stepping on my toes and making some mistakes, add in the personality conflict I had with the chief. And I did, what many humans do. I started nursing my sorrows with alcohol, which was not a good drunk. So all of that culminated, kind of a bad call or damaging my credibility as a leader. Fast forward, continue this cycle. We deployed in April of 2005. Echo deployed to Afghanistan. Foxtrot deployed to Germany on the standby mission, and continued to butt heads pretty hard with my platoon chief. Not one of my prouder moments. He and I got into a screaming match in front of we were doing stuff in Denmark and got into a screaming match with each other in front of both the Danes and our troop. So once again, I just kind of eroding some of my credibility as a leader. June 28, 2005, we were getting ready to do what we call a rotate in place. So Echo Platoon was going to come take that mission in Germany, and we were going to Afghanistan to pick up the combat rotation, because it was the SEAL leadership's goal to have all SEALs combat experienced. So they would do this rotate in place during deployments. So we were gearing up. I think it was only like a week or so before we were supposed to head to Afghanistan when June 28th is the Operation Red Wings mission. So that is the lone survivor story. And I remember walking in the platoon hut in Germany, and the guys were like, "Hey man, one of our helicopters got shot down." So we didn't have any information initially, and then started to find out like what had happened, that the reconnaissance team led by Mike Murphy was on the ground with Marcus Luttrell, Matt Axelson, and Danny Dietz. And they had been overrun by a larger Taliban force, that we had launched our quick reaction force that had our guys from our sister platoon on that helicopter, along with our boss, Eric Christensen, and Mike McGreevy, who was my friend who I had been in that platoon with. And the helicopter had been shot down. We didn't know everybody had been killed at that point. Everybody was still kind of holding out hope. We didn't know what had happened to the guys on the ground. It would take several days before all that finally developed. We did know Marcus was on the run, and that we knew. And then we started to find out that everybody else had been killed. Marcus would end up being recovered, multiple days later, and they recovered the bodies of Mike Murphy and Danny Dietz. So they had flown Marcus and Danny Dietz and Mike Murphy's bodies back to Landstuhl. So me and some other guys drove up there to meet them, and that was kind of the first time we got to connect with some of our guys from our sister platoon and hear what had happened. We tried to meet Marcus that night, but they were doing debriefing and stuff with him. But we ended up standing the watch over Mike Murphy and Danny Dietz to give the guys. And anytime we fly service members home on an honor flight, there's always someone on watch with them. And I remember standing the watch for those guys for a period of time to let our guys go get some food and relax. And I had never met Mike Murphy or Danny Dietz. Well, I think I had met Danny years ago when he was at SDV Team 2, but I didn't know him well, and I had never met Mike Murphy. But just that is the first time I had stood with teammates with flag draped caskets, so that made me think a lot. Also, went back to met Marcus the next day. And kind of heard that story more about everything that had happened with how Gulab had saved him and his extraction. And then we went back to base. Matt Axelson still had not been recovered. My chief and several other guys flew into Afghanistan to go help with the recovery. And we continued to pack up and get ready. Several days later, we flew to Afghanistan. And I think it was 3 days later that finally they recovered Matt Axelson. And we had the ramp ceremony, which is a pretty somber event where we all line up at the airport on the tarmac, in formation. And we drive the vehicle with the flag draped casket up to the back of the plane, the honor flight that's taking them home. And they're moved on to that flight for their final flight home. And, and then we went back to base, and we had the memorial ceremonies for all these guys. I mean, the greatest loss of life that the SEAL teams had since World War II. We lost 11 guys, and 5 were guys I knew very well. Obviously, Mike McGreevy, my boss, Eric Christensen, Jeff Taylor was the leading petty officer of Echo Platoon, JT, Jeff Lucas, and then Jacques Fontaine was one of the chiefs. So that was kind of a real shock. Definitely, if when I was young in Colombia, it was like, this is for real. That was very much like, this is for real. So yeah, continue to the deployment. We ended up moving down to the Helmand province of Afghanistan and conducting operations down there. pretty successful. We hit some cave complexes and got some pretty big battle damage assessments of Taliban we took out. September 23rd, we conducted an operation in the Helmand province to clear out some cave complexes and some pretty heavy Taliban activity. I was in charge of an overwatch position. We basically locked down this valley. There was a valley that ran north or south, and then on each side on the ridge lines we had forces on each side, and then there was a ridge line on the northern side that we positioned individuals. So I was in charge of some of our guys, snipers. We had a javelin, a rocket crew that was tasked if any vehicles tried to make their way out of the valley, we would take them out. And then I had a machine gunner, and we held that position most of the day. Guys got into a couple of gunfights throughout the day. And then later in the day, they got into a pretty big gunfight down in the bottom of the valley. My boss, the OIC, was down in the valley floor doing clearance operations, and he requested backup. And I made a decision at this point to go down into the valley and take the machine gunner with me. It was a bad decision. And really, when I called back and said I was going to do it, and my chief, who we did not get along, was the one on the other end of the radio who was like, not only no, but hell no. And I'll be honest, he was right. Unfortunately, I let my personal feelings get in the way, and I was kind of like, well, screw you. You're not going to tell me I can't go down there. I'm going to go support these guys. If I had waited, what I would have found out was, hey, we're spinning up air support to call in bombs down in this valley. So when I made the decision to go down into the valley, it delayed the air support, which is a big problem because we need to know where everybody is on the battlefield. And when we moved down into the valley, we didn't have communications. It was very steep, like almost 1,000 feet straight down. So a bad call on my part, and I am super lucky that we did not get engaged. I mean, there was caves and fighting positions all through this area. And thankfully, we didn't get engaged. By the time we got to the bottom of the valley, our radio picked back up, and they were like, get your ass out of the valley. We're trying to call in air support. We can't. Scampered up the northern side and got to the top, dropped bombs, got everybody out of there, and relinked back up, everybody back together. And, yeah, my name was Mud. So the guys were like, get rid of that guy. He's going to get people killed. So I got flown back to Bagram, had to meet with our commanding officer. And there were a lot of guys that were like, hey, kick him out, you know, and all the problems that I had done to myself, although I wasn't seeing it that way yet, you know, the personality conflict with my chief, ego getting in the way of, you know, trying to learn faster by pummeling myself with the guys who knew more than me. Obviously, the drinking was something that came up frequently. And then this bad call on the mission, all of that came together for them. A lot of guys saying, kick that guy out.
So you completely lost the trust and faith from all of the teammates, or were there still some that were like, ride or die, JR?
No. I was pretty well ostracized. I mean, the only one who really believed, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there are a few friends I had in the moment. I didn't feel like that. I definitely had some friends who turned their back on me and were like, we're not talking to you anymore. The commanding officer believed in me, which is a fortunate thing because it would have been very easy for me. His name is Kent Perro. Big shout out to you, Kent. He gave me a second chance. And I'm very fortunate and thankful for that. It didn't come without work to do. And basically he said, I'm not going to kick you out, but they rescinded any awards. So, you know, any of the awards I was supposed to receive from that deployment were taken away. So that kind of sent a message to the guys, hey, we're not going to recognize him we're not going to reinforce any bad behaviors by awarding him. They wrote they wrote a letter of reprimand. If an officer gets a letter of reprimand, an official letter of reprimand in his record, it ends their career. You won't make rank. So instead they said, hey, we're going to put this in my safe. And if you do a good job on your next leadership role over the next 2 years, then this letter will get shredded and it won't go into your record, and your career moves on and you learn from this. And if you mess up, then this letter goes in your record and that ends your career. And they said, and we're sending you to U.S. Army Ranger School. Ranger School is a leadership school at its heart and soul. A lot of people are like, why would they send you to Ranger School? There's a lot of respect. The Army holds a lot of esteem for Ranger School, and it's a very difficult school. It's probably one of the, third or fourth hardest schools in the military. Not as hard as SEAL training, but definitely a very difficult school. And I got sent to Ranger School. So a lot of lessons there. A lot of growing up. I will admit that in the beginning, I still kind of viewed myself as a victim, which is one of the big reasons I like the victor, not victim shirt. So many of us in this life get caught up on that victim mindset. Things happen to us, and we have a tendency to blame other things. And many times in this life, not always, sometimes, everybody plays a part in when things go wrong. It's pretty rare that we have no faults of our own. And I had a lot of faults and a lot of things. And at Ranger School, I finally really started to grow up and come to recognize, hey, man, a lot of the mistakes I made was just poor leadership decisions, selfish decisions, immature decisions. And that really kind of turned the tide for me. I really started studying leadership and how can I be a better leader, and came back to my next platoon with a very different mindset.
Is that a normal thing to be? I mean, obviously it's punishment, but is that a normal thing that a SEAL would go through Ranger School, or are you like one of very few that have done both?
So years ago, prior to 9/11, we used to send junior officers to Ranger School because it's a good school. I mean, you learn small unit tactics. There's a lot of respect with having the Ranger tab. Our guys that have the Ranger tab, we do a lot of joint operations with the Army. There's always a little friction between the Army and the Navy. So wearing that Ranger tab, and later for me, it carried tremendous weight. I mean, I'd walk into a joint operations center or joint special operations task force operations center, and the guys would be like, oh, you got a Ranger tab, like you speak Army, like, you're cool.
Yeah.
So after 9/11, we stopped sending guys just because of the cycle and just, war and all that. But, every now and then we still send guys. I don't know if the SEAL teams have gone back to that or not.
Has it ever gone? It couldn't go the other way, could it?
Meaning?
Someone in the Army doing SEAL training.
Not necessarily. We Green Berets with dive experience are SEAL instructors. So they are SEAL training instructors. So those guys will come out and they'll augment and be an instructor at SEAL training. But I am not aware of individual from other military units coming and doing all of SEAL training. Now, I know a lot of guys, and we had some in our classes who left. We have a lot of Marines who come and go through SEAL training, and traditionally they do real well. In my class, we had a guy who had been a Green Beret who left the Army and came and went through SEAL training.
Got it. So what was the biggest takeaway from Ranger School that you brought back with you?
You can't pick and choose when you're going to lead, and you always have to think through, and leadership is not perfection. You're going to have strengths and weaknesses, but it's managing, it's amplifying your strengths and managing your weaknesses. And even in your weaker times, you still have to lead, relying on your team. It's not, I think the first go around, I viewed it as weakness to ask, to admit, hey, I don't know how to do this. I mean,
yeah.
When the tactics changed and these younger guys had more experience than me, that was like an affront to my ego. And a leader can't know everything. I mean, it's impossible. And you surround yourself with people who are better and smarter than you. And it's okay for a leader to say, hey, man, I don't know how to do this. Can you teach me? Even though he's the leader, like you're the subject matter expert, or you have more experience just because of the nature of how things look. And that's not a knock on your leadership. If anything, you're building a better team and a better culture. You're like, hey, even though I'm the leader, I acknowledge that you have more experience than me
Empowering
in
others,
this
yeah.
area.
Yeah.
And like, I respect that and I want to learn from you from it. So I think those were the things that I really picked up. Very cognizant. I had routinely been very impulsive at times in my career with decision making. So I really tried to negate that. I really tried to manage my emotions better as I moved forward. So all those things I carried forward to the new platoon. And don't get me wrong, I mean, it wasn't easy. There was the guys. Most of the guys were not excited that I'd been assigned to this new troop. I was still Rambo Red from Afghanistan. And so thankfully, I had a really good mentor, my new boss was a really good mentor. He was a prior enlisted officer, and he was very smart. He told me right from the beginning, he said, "Hey, Red, I don't care what happened in Afghanistan. All I care about is, right here and now, I'm moving forward." He said, I'm gonna call upon you to lead, and I'm gonna call, and at times I expect you to follow, and I'm gonna give you opportunities to do both.
Yeah, so kind of mentored you.
Yeah, and he did.
Yeah.
He put me in he looked for complicated scenarios, training scenarios to put me into, to both build my confidence, for me to feel comfortable and confident in my abilities as a leader and officer, but also bigger than that, to put confidence in the guys, that they were like, man, this guy's going to lead us. He's going to make tactical decisions. He's making good decisions. We trust him to go into combat. So he did a really good job of building that, over that year and a half as we trained up to go to war and go to Iraq. In April of 2004, our team, SEAL Team 10, was tasked to deploy to Iraq. So our troops were split up. We were one troop. One troop was assigned Fallujah and the western province of Iraq. And then two troop went to Baghdad. So they were operating in Baghdad and Sadr City. Iraq was a hot mess at this point. 2006-07, really, Iraq started to implode. And for us, I mean, there was a lot going on. We ended up operating in the beginning almost every night, and throughout the deployment, that slowed down a little, but not too much. We would do 80 direct action missions throughout that deployment, and definitely got into
80 across how long?
6 months. So, yeah, roughly.
And really briefly, take us through what one of those missions would look like as you go out. Like, how long are these taking? Like, how much of the night are you gone? What does a typical mission look like? And I'm interested to know what that looks like.
So in Iraq, it actually, it was kind of everything you dreamed of doing as a SEAL. Later, guys ended up doing what we call, they were embedded and living out in the villages with the Afghans and stuff like that. And that was a much harder mission. That's much more of just a more difficult mission. You're exposed to a lot more all the time. And whereas what we were doing is we were based on Fallujah. We were doing much more of a, we call it direct action. So you're going after specific targets, and we would get tasked. So a typical night, we'd get up, we slept in the daytime, and typically we got up at 4:30 in the afternoon, and the first thing we do, we would have a leadership briefing. So the leaders would come together and we would find out, hey, is anything spinning? Do we have a target package? Are we being assigned? And either A, yes, or B, hey, maybe something's brewing, we'll see, or C, no, there's nothing on the books for tonight. Usually then we'd go eat dinner or breakfast for us, and then we'd come back, and if the mission was a go, then we'd start mission planning. So we'd start prepping for the mission depending on what we were doing, whether it was going to be a helicopter assault, mobility mission, or a combination, however it was going to work. So, we'd assign everybody their different jobs. The way we worked, we had two different platoons, so we would every week we would trade back and forth. So one week, one platoon would do the assaults, so they would actually do the target takedown, and the other platoon would run mobility. They'd run the vehicles and provide the cordon security. So depending on what was happening, was how the mission planning and stuff. So my job, I was either an assault force commander, meaning I was actually working on target takedown, layout, assault team, how we're going to do this, how we're going to lock the target down, how we're going to flow. Or I was a mobility force commander. I was in charge of all of our vehicles. So if it was a mobility op, I was focused on, we have to have our vehicles prepped, our weapons, what's the route, how are we going to navigate, how do we mitigate the IED threat, all those different things.
Do they train you on like a variety of different weapon, or is it sort of like a standard, this is what the SEALs carry is, I guess, an M4 or whatever it ends up being?
No, you learn on all our different weapons.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so every guy in a SEAL platoon should have the ability to pick up and operate any weapon in our arsenal. So everybody has the ability, from the heavy weapons on the vehicle, because that's the reality. Anybody could get shot.
And you need to be able to
have to
improvise.
Be able to grab their weapon and make it work.
Wow, okay.
So, yep.
And are you guys is these missions like kicking down doors, or is it more like stealthy? Like, I know the SEALs operate in the night for a reason. You don't want people to know you're coming. But what are these missions typically like when you actually get on target?
No, I mean, it's definitely kicking down doors. There is the best mission, really, as much as, you like to think, hey, getting into a gunfight and blowing down doors and shooting your way into a target. But the downside of that is, bad guys shoot back. People get killed. So some of the best missions we ever did, we literally snuck in and we literally a M4 in the forehead with a knee in the chest of the guy we were after in his bed. And that's how he woke up, and wrapped him up, and we were off target with never a shot fired. Those were some of the best targets, if you will. Sometimes the intel wasn't good, and sometimes, there wouldn't be anybody there. I mean, that happened.
So a successful mission is no shots fired.
That's a great mission. I don't want to say necessarily. If we can get a guy and there's no shots fired, that's a very,
right.
You don't have to worry about people not coming home when that occurs.
Yeah, I think that's very different from what's portrayed in movies. It's always kicking down doors, shooting. It's like very action-packed, and I feel like... Well,
Hollywood wants to... And don't worry, we had a lot of missions that were that way, but, our goal was we captured significantly more than we killed. The goal was to capture. They were capture-kill missions. That's the way they're written. Our goal is to capture. We can get information from live people. You can't get any information from dead people. So, and that's really how the war continued to expand. We had the ability, we would capture people and, we'd turn them over to the detention centers, and then, the interrogators would work with them and they'd find out more information that would lead to new targets and all these different things.
When you guys are going out, do you particularly have like an interpreter or someone, or did you have to learn languages?
No, we had interpreters, so they were vetted. Okay. Oftentimes they'd be American citizens who maybe they were born in Iraq and their families had come to America, so they were recruited and screened. So that, because to work with us, obviously they had to have a, security clearance and
Sure.
all that.
Yeah, because if you guys are going out and you have no idea what the enemy is screaming or saying,
we learned basic commands in Arabic.
Yeah.
I had commands written on the end of my gun so that I could tell someone to get down or show me your hands or things like that. So you understood some of the basic things, but no, I did not.
Was there ever a time where you could hear them saying things in Arabic
Arabic's a complicated language, so okay. No, I never picked it up.
Not
like
even
that.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I would assume when you guys are out and about and you're shouting commands like moving or whatever, like I'm sure they're doing the same thing on their side, and it probably helped to either have an interpreter or somebody say, "Hey, that guy just took cover over there. Or that guy's running behind."
And our
there.
interpreter was always right there with us.
Okay.
We had at least two with us who were, with different leadership, and they were always listening. And
yeah, it's definitely a totally different way of like in a firefight to have the enemy as being a totally different language. I mean, if you're at least if you're in the States, and a police officer most of the time is going to have somebody hiding behind something, like most often they're going to be speaking English. But if you're in a totally different country and it's a totally different language, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, they're yelling stuff. You have no clue what
Yeah,
they're
you have
yelling.
no idea what they're saying. And you're like, did this guy just throw a grenade? Or
but humans are humans, and the universal language of does a lot.
Right.
You know, people respond very quickly when,
people with guns come in the door.
Yeah,
Sure.
you know, when they're facing lead
But it's probably
medicine.
scarier too when you hear people screaming stuff behind walls, and it's like, am I going to turn around this corner and this guy has either a gun or an RPG or something right there?
I don't think it matters. You plan for that. I don't care whether whether they're screaming in English or whether they're screaming in Arabic. I don't think it matters.
Yeah.
You know, you're an unknown threat. I mean, you could be on the other side of the wall singing Kumbaya. You're still an unknown threat.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to treat anyone that's on target until they're secure as a threat. I don't care if it's a 3-year-old kid. Granted, that's a little easier to manhandle and very quickly figure out, okay, you're not a threat. But as opposed to a grown man or woman, you could have a suicide vest, so you can be saying whatever you want. Once again, whether it's English or Arabic, it doesn't matter. Right. We're assessing what we see and what is happening.
Right.
Yeah, you have a protocol.
So language doesn't really, it matters.
It just makes it probably harder.
It doesn't matter when you're taking a target down. How about that? Once the target's secure, language then becomes very much in play. And that's where the interpreter's involved, where we're questioning people and going through, because the first part of a mission is the target takedown. Once the target's secure, then it becomes, and we actually went and worked with local police. We went in the States. We went and worked with the Boston police and other police units to understand the policing side of the mission. So the first phase was assault, target takedown. Second phase was policing. Mm-hmm. We called it sensitive site exploitation. We had to get evidence, because these individuals we would capture would get turned over to the detention centers, and then the Iraqi courts would process them, and there would be evidence that came with it. So we had to make sure we understood how to do those things.
So speaking of missions being successful and not successful, in 2007, I'd like to hear kind of...
So yeah, September 13, 2007, we were tasked to go after the number one leader for Al-Qaeda in the Anbar province. And long story short, we walked into a very well executed ambush. The leader was in the house we were moving to. His security detail had set up an ambush line in the vegetation across the street from that house, and we walked into that ambush. Multiple members of our team were shot up. There was the house was kind of to the northwest, and we were probably 100 yards from the house, and north of where we were, it was nothing but empty Iraqi desert fields. Our guys fell back to a large tractor tire, and then there was one tree. So DJ Shipley was in my team that night. DJ fell back behind the tree. Matt and Luke Luke was our medic. Matty was one of our guys, assaulters, and they both got shot in the initial gunfight. I was out front trying to lay down fire. I got shot multiple times. And then I tried to turn and move back to where those guys were, and I caught a machine gun round in the face, hit me right in front of the ear and traveled through my face and knocked me out. So pretty intense gunfight erupted, with our guys back behind the tire in the tree, fighting what we estimate to be 12 to 15 enemy fighters with 2 PKM machine guns, which is a big belt-fed weapon. And I was pinned down in between them. So literally I'm probably 15 yards in front of the tire, and then, beyond me is the vegetation, where the enemy is inside this, this thicket shooting back at them where they're fighting positions. So, almost a 35 to 40 minute gunfight. I was unconscious for probably the first 5-10 minutes. When I came to, I recognized, man, I am totally in a bad position, and like there's really nothing I could do. I had to trust my teammates to win the gunfight. One of the things we learn in special operations, you can't be like, hey, you got to come save me right now, because obviously they're just going to run into a wall of gunfire, and then you just have more people shot and killed. So you have to be patient. The first thing you have to do is win the fight. So I had to accept that, and the team continued to fight. My team leader made the decision to request a fire mission from an AC-130 gunship that we had overhead, but they denied it the first 2 times because we were too close. We were so close. If they brought those rounds in I was only 45 feet from the machine gun that had me pinned down. So that's, in the movies, they talk about danger close parameters. We were extreme danger close.
What is constituted by danger close?
It is based on the munitions that the aircraft fires and the distance. So every round that we have, whether it's a bomb, whether it's a 40 millimeter explosive round, even the the A-10, the 30 millimeter cannon on the A-10, military engineers will fire those things on ranges, and they'll figure out how far out does the fragmentation or the blast radius go. So the furthest parameters of that blast and frag radius, that's the danger close parameter. So the idea is, and we know those things, you're like, hey, you need to be at least X distance away if you're using this round or this bomb, so that we don't capture, or so we don't injure or kill our friendly forces. And we were way within
45 feet. That's crazy. It's right on top of you, basically.
Correct.
Clearly, you were very, very close.
Very
Was there
close.
any hesitation, or was it like, we're going to die, so it doesn't matter?
The gunship denied it. Both the first 2 times.
But from you guys calling it in, you were like, there was
my team leader, I wasn't involved in that decision making. I could hear it on the radio, but I was pretty messed up, and I don't remember, but I was drifting in and out of consciousness from the blood loss and my injuries. My team leader was requesting the fire mission the 3rd time, and it was probably 20 minutes from the initial request to the final request, the 3rd request. But he told him, he said, hey, look, if you don't bring this in, there's not going to be anybody left. And they put the responsibility on him. They said, hey, there's a real good chance we're going to kill you guys, and you need to acknowledge that, which he did. So then he released that, and I remember him, yelling out to me, hey, stand by, incoming, and hearing those rounds come in, and obviously taking out the gun in front of me, and then multiple other. We ended up calling, I don't know how many, 7 or 8 different fire missions before we took out all the enemy. Called in the medevac, which got me and our other wounded teammates to Baghdad, saved my life. And after we met it back, they vaporized that field with 105. So that's the largest. It's a 105 millimeter cannon, and I don't know how many rounds they.
At what point do they tell you guys to be able to call in a fire mission? Like, is there a specific point in time where you're like, we can't win this?
We request it.
Oh, so you?
Yeah,
okay.
It's driven by the guys on the ground. So
Okay.
if we're in a bad situation, you request, hey, I need an immediate fire mission. And depending on what assets are overhead, whether it's helicopter gunships, or if we have fast movers, jets dropping bombs, or, the best, in our case, the AC-130 gunship is probably the most significant air-to-ground
Is it pretty
platform.
normal for air support to sort of be like following you guys?
Yeah,
into
as a matter of
missions?
fact, it was so hairy in Iraq by the end of our deployment, the last several months, it was a go, no-go criteria for us, meaning
Oh, wow.
if we did not have a gunship, we weren't going out
Wow.
on a mission. So,
Okay. Yeah, I was always curious, like how air support works.
so they're up overhead, and the whole mission, they're following you
Okay.
on target watching, because not only do they have the ability to bring in close air support, they also have some of the most state-of-the-art
Surveillance and
surveillance systems.
they could see you guys like on the ground. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure they could see enemy position as well to let you guys
but they
know.
can't see everything. It's not perfect. I mean, obviously, we were calling to them, hey, when we were moving through that vegetation, can you see weapons? And no, they couldn't see that.
Could they at least see like through thermal?
They could see that people were there.
Wow, but they just didn't know what they had, and they obviously can't tell if there's any mines or anything in the ground either.
No.
That's up to you guys to figure out.
Yep, they can't see that. At least not yet. I don't know. Maybe they've got new technology now that
technology has advanced in 2007.
A lot.
Yeah.
But no drones back then. It's not like they could just send a drone.
We had drones.
Oh, they did.
We had a drone overhead.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so not obviously
nothing like what's
what
today.
today.
So thank God for that. Man, I talk to my buddies now. I mean, this new drone warfare is crazy.
Yeah.
I'm thankful we didn't have that.
So you sustained significant injuries that night. What was the recovery like? How quickly were you able to touch base with your wife and able to kind of talk to human beings again, let them know you're okay?
So I resigned myself that I was dying there. God saved me. I believe that. God and the gunship, my teammates, the amazing military professionals at Baghdad. So when I woke up, I was kind of dumbfounded and like, oh my God, like I'm alive. And I was high as a kite. I wasn't really allowed to do drugs when I was in the military. So suddenly I wake up and I'm on, Dilaudid, which is a very potent, like morphine narcotic. So yeah, I mean, I'm just floating on cloud 9 and like, I'm still alive. And then I remember like my commanding officer and my master chief were there and I tried to speak and like just air came out. And a nurse came up, I think they told her, hey, he's awake. And a nurse came up and said, hey, Lieutenant, you've been severely wounded. You are trached. You're not going to be able to talk. So I said, okay, give me a pen and paper. And then I wrote out 3 questions. I asked my commanding officer, were our guys okay? Because I knew Maddie and Luke had been shot up. And he said, yep, they're okay. They're out of surgery. I said, has my wife been notified? And he said, yes, I spoke to her myself. And then I don't know why I said, do I still look pretty? And I don't know, just inject some humor, which is, one of the saving graces of the military in the hard, dark moments. So yeah, that was kind of the first thing. They would move me from Baghdad, save my life, blood transfusions in Baghdad. They moved me to Balad. Which is where head injuries go. And I think they were packaging me to fly to Germany. Some of this I don't remember. Flew me to Germany. That was the first time technically I spoke to Erica. Teammate was there. He flew with me. And we called Erica, and I couldn't talk, obviously, so I just wrote messages. So my first message to Erica was, hey, babe, I got all shot up, but my wang's okay. And so that was my first message to my wife, which she really appreciated.
Yeah.
And from there, they flew me on the medevac ICU C-17 from Germany to Bethesda, Maryland, where they started working on me, which started a very long road. 2 months initially in the hospital. And then it became outpatient, but almost 40 surgeries over 4 years.
Wow.
A very long road. A lot of battlefield injuries are very dirty. I had infection problems. The nose that I have is the 3rd nose they built. The first 2 totally failed. My arm, originally they were going to amputate it, and then it was totally fused. And then later I had an amazing doctor out of Johns Hopkins who rebuilt my elbow and got me at least a little bit of movement, not much, but more than what I had. So it was my goal to be operational, to stay operational, to go back and continue to be a SEAL. Unfortunately, obviously, 4 years surgeries, when we got to the end of that did not happen. With my arm not being able to bend any further than this created a real problem to grab gear and anything like that. So that kind of brought my operational career to an end. And although I said, hey, I want to finish my career, I came in to do 20 years. So I got to finish. I got to do different things while I was recovering, operations. I did some special projects, training, stuff like that before I medically retired from the military, in 2013.
And post-military, you've done a lot. And I think that kind of all started from what it seems, it kind of all started there in the hospital room. You wrote the sign on the door. I feel like you kind of developed a mentality through that recovery. What was there any signs of like your business journey and any signs of that before this injury was sustained, or did that kind of all spur out of like this, like, I want to build myself back better mentality that you kind of created?
No, I think some of that started with, I think that mindset and started with my leadership failure. Like, hey man, how do I become the best version of myself? And that mindset of you drive forward despite the naysayers, but despite the hate, despite the doubts you may have. So really, I think God set me up for success with my injuries, with what I went through prior to that. So no, there was never really a thought of, I'd always thought, I got a business degree at Old Dominion because I did think, I knew someday I'd retire from the military. I had hoped to do 30 years. I had hoped that I would be a commanding officer. I'd hoped that I would have served at our Tier 1 team. But obviously, life doesn't always work that way. I had never given much thought to what I was going to do after the military. When I was in college, one of the courses I took was a entrepreneurship course. And Erica and I used to scuba dive together. So we did have this business plan for a dive bed and breakfast to own this beautiful house in the Keys or on an island. And we would take, it'd be this high end, like we bring people in and we take them diving. And I always loved that idea. And, we shared that together. And that was one of the dreams we had after the military. My wounds kind of changed that. I have tried diving since I was wounded, but it's painful for me. I get this bad pain behind my eye, and I joke, like I don't know if my eye's going to pop out into my mask. So I've tried it a couple of times. I'm not pushing my luck. But no, some of it I stumbled into. I think many individuals, when they get wounded, you have a lot of people who help you. And that's what happened with me. And there's also needs you have. One of the problems I had was with my injuries, I couldn't wear, I had all this metal hardware and I'm trached and I couldn't wear. Actually, the catalyst for this became from Mike Monsoor's Medal of Honor ceremony because I wanted to wear my uniform. And I got metal coming out of my arm and I'm trached and I couldn't wear my uniform. And I wanted to go to this ceremony in my uniform. It's like 2008, I think. And I went to a seamstress and I was like, can you help me wear my jacket? Can you cut it? And like, I had this idea, like the clothes would have Velcro that would go under the metal hardware. And like, can you extend the collar where I can wear it over my trach? And she helped do that. And that became the idea behind a company called Wounded Wear, where we made modified clothing for wounded warriors. And that grew into events. And 10 years we ran that event or that company. Did some amazing things. We raised over $3 million, helped thousands of wounded warriors. But I learned a lot about business, and I learned a lot running a non. If you ever want to learn about business or how hard it is, run a nonprofit. Very difficult. You're constantly having to fundraise. You're constantly, every detail has to be very tightly accounted for because of the transparency that you need. And absolutely, it should be that way. So that taught me a lot. I started speaking. I had written a lot when I was in the hospital because I couldn't talk. I was trach for 7 months. So I wrote a lot about Iraq and gunfights, and then that turned in writing a lot about Afghanistan and my leadership failures and that growth, and all of that turned into the Trident. the first book. I got connected with John Bruning, who helped me really put it together and package it, and we wrote it. And so about the time I retired from the Navy, the Trident came out, the nonprofit continued to grow. I started speaking, and that we created a speaking company. So starting to learn more about business and about how do you build yourself, how do you build a brand, how do you manage all these things. So slowly building all these things. COVID happened, and I was speaking full time at that point. We had phased down the nonprofit. I wanted to get more involved with organizations that were more focused on TBI and PTSD, because I was starting to lose friends from suicide. And I'll be honest, I was just burnt out. 10 years of running a nonprofit, 10 years of asking for money. We had gotten involved in a lawsuit that was super ugly. All of it made me say, you know what, I think I'd rather lend my name and credibility to other organizations, especially in the mental health TBI space. So was moving down that road. Speaking was exploding, 18, 19, 20. I was doing 75, 80 events a year. And then COVID happened. And COVID really was a shocker, because like many people that went through COVID, individuals who ran gyms, individuals who ran anything where people needed to interact overnight, their business is shut down. And that's what happened to us, Erica and I. In 2020, we were on, for January and February, we must have done 40 events in January and February. And then overnight, everything went away. And thankfully, we didn't live outside our means, but it was my military. We also had not diversified our income streams. We were only relying on speaking income. And suddenly overnight, all that went away. So thank God for my retirement pay, because that kept us from losing the house or anything like that. But it also opened my eyes to business and made me say, man, I got to get smarter. I need to diversify our income streams. I need to change my strategy. So as speaking picked back up in 21, we started setting money aside and investing in real estate and other things. And I was specifically looking for things to invest in, things to get involved in, which obviously led me to meet you guys in 2023.
Yep. I was going to say the rest is history, and then now you're on a can.
Yeah.
Now you're on a can.
So,
yeah.
Well, it's amazing launching a product. I mean, I will say, hindsight being 2020, I wish I had studied the beverage market a little more. I think all of us underestimated how difficult.
Yeah.
My buddy Bedros Koulian has frequently told me, who has been a serial entrepreneur his whole life, for every business, it'll take twice as long. It'll cost twice as much money. We are living proof of that in this money pit I have, but it's worth the journey. And we have an amazing product in Patriot Hard Seltzer. There's no doubt about it in my mind. I wish sometimes it wasn't quite as difficult when you have a great product to get it out of the gates.
Yeah.
But we're doing it. And for anybody that's listening to this, it tastes amazing. It represents everything that I believe in, the greatness of this nation, the freedom and opportunity we have here. You guys created a great product, and we're going to build this brand, and someday it'll be all across this country, and this journey will be worth it. But like all entrepreneurs, man, we're in the trenches. You guys definitely are in the trenches, but we're building it. And if you're listening to this, go buy some Patriot Seltzer.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you on the cans, happy to be working with you. You've done wonders for the brand. And I mean, we talk about it all the time. You really helped us, help become a catalyst for the brand's growth and connecting us with the veteran population and the first responders. And it's been really good.
The nonprofits too.
Absolutely. Yeah. All the nonprofits we work with. For those who are still watching, we don't have one of the cans here. He's currently on all the cans, but on the next set of cans, he will be on the Cherry Cola, and we will have 3 other Proud Patriots who will be replacing him on the other 3 flavors. We're going to be telling the stories of people such as yourself that have served this country. Thank you for your service, and thank you for taking the time to do this with us.
Yeah, honored. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
Go get some Patriot Seltzer.
Cool.
Sweet.
All right.
It's a wrap.